For 15 relentless years, every single morning before the city outside stirred, I found myself cleaning the office of Apex Innovations CEO. I knew precisely how Julian Vance demanded his vast desk be arranged, every item at a perfect 90-degree angle. He insisted on brilliant sunlight pouring through spotless windows, reflecting off surfaces utterly devoid of dust. Not a single mote dared to linger in his pristine domain. The man lived for appearances, consumed by a hunger for power. His entire existence seemed dedicated to broadcasting his inflated sense of success to the world. He remained blissfully ignorant of the fundamental truth. He never suspected that I, the man polishing his floors, secretly held 60% of Apex Innovations. My name is Evan Thompson, though everyone here at Apex Innovations knew me only as Mike, the building maintenance guy. Just the quiet fellow in the faded navy blue uniform who emptied their overflowing trash cans, buffed their expensive floors until they shone, and somehow remained utterly invisible despite always being right there in front of them. I started working in this building, the Zenith Tower, back in 2008, just as the shockwaves of the financial downturn were beginning to truly rattle the foundations of the business world. But I wasn't hired as part of the maintenance crew back then. I was the chief technology officer, a co-founder, and a major shareholder of Apex Innovations. Julian and I had conjured this company from nothing, practically built it in our college dorm room. We were just two ambitious kids fresh out of university, overflowing with grand dreams and possessing perfectly complementary skills. I possessed the deep technical knowledge, the innovative spark, and the strategic vision for the future. He, on the other hand, wielded the charisma, the charm, and the raw sales expertise needed to bring our ideas to market. But Julian possessed something else too, a cold, ruthless streak hidden beneath the polished surface, something I tragically discovered far too late. When the markets crashed during the downturn and our company's stock plummeted, Julian didn't see disaster. He saw a twisted opportunity. He secretly conspired with other board members, convincing them to dilute my ownership stake, cynically claiming it was a necessary sacrifice to save the company from ruin. They strategically called an emergency board meeting while I was thousands of miles away, overseas, keeping vigil at my dying mother's bedside. They knew full well I couldn't possibly make it back in time to defend myself. By the time I returned, numb with grief and exhaustion, I discovered I had allegedly been voted out, stripped of my position and influence. Julian, my former friend, spun a vicious, calculated story painting me as emotionally unstable, claiming my decision-making had become erratic under the pressure of the crisis. He even produced documents, papers purporting to show I had willingly signed away my voting rights. Documents I instantly knew were blatant forgeries, but which I lacked the immediate resources or proof to contest effectively at that devastating time. In a sickeningly short span, I lost everything that mattered: my position as CTO, my hard-earned reputation in the tech industry, the network of colleagues and friends I had built over years. All of it vanished, evaporated like smoke. Julian's meticulously crafted smear campaign was brutally thorough, poisoning the well against me. No other reputable tech company would even consider touching me. My personal savings rapidly dwindled, eaten away by the mounting costs of futile legal battles I simply couldn't win against Apex Innovations' formidable army of high-priced corporate lawyers. It was then, hitting rock bottom, feeling the cold weight of betrayal and injustice, that I decided I had to play the long game. There was no other way. I sold off my remaining shares, a pitiful 5% of the company I co-founded, and channeled that money into creating an intricate, almost invisible web of shell companies: Argent Capital, Horizon Ventures, Meridian Equity, and others. Then, operating through various proxies and carefully structured investment vehicles, hidden behind layers of corporate anonymity, I began the slow, patient process of quietly buying up Apex Innovation stock whenever its price dipped. Julian's relentlessly aggressive, often reckless, expansion plans meant the company frequently found itself desperate for capital injections. This created repeated opportunities for my discreetly hidden entities to steadily, methodically increase their collective holdings unnoticed. But accumulating shares wasn't enough. I needed proximity. I needed to be close, to watch him, to wait patiently, and to gain an intimate, granular understanding of every facet of the company's day-to-day operations. So, I did something Julian, in his boundless arrogance, would never, ever expect. I took a job as a maintenance worker in the very building that housed our company, the Zenith Tower. He didn't recognize me, not even a flicker. How could he possibly? The driven, ambitious young tech visionary he had so callously betrayed bore absolutely no resemblance to the unassuming, middle-aged maintenance guy shuffling down the corridor in a worn, ill-fitting uniform. Over the years, I had intentionally let myself gain weight, grew a nondescript mustache, meticulously learned to cultivate a defeated slouch and a hesitant shuffle. I consciously trained myself to be utterly forgettable, a ghost in the machine. Whenever Julian's dismissive eyes inevitably slid past me in the polished hallways, registering me as nothing more than part of the background, I felt a grim satisfaction. My disguise, my cloak of invisibility, was perfect. For 15 long years, I watched Apex Innovations expand, fueled by Julian's relentless ambition. I became a silent observer, absorbing everything. I listened intently to unguarded conversations executives held when they foolishly thought no one of consequence was within earshot. I carefully retrieved and read confidential documents carelessly discarded in trash bins, meticulously noting which projects soared and which inevitably crashed and burned under his often flawed leadership. I learned the intimate details of Julian's arrogant management style, pinpointed his exploitable weaknesses, his dangerous tendency to overextend the company's financial resources, chasing fleeting glory. Soon, I knew more about the inner workings of Apex Innovations than anyone else within these walls. Except, unlike Julian, my understanding wasn't limited to the executive suite. I understood how things truly functioned from the ground up, from the boiler room to the boardroom. I knew precisely which maintenance crews felt chronically underpaid and deeply frustrated by the management's indifference. I knew which talented middle managers were repeatedly passed over for promotions they deserved, their potential stifled by Julian's favoritism and ego. I knew exactly where every hidden crack, every structural weakness, lay concealed beneath Julian's gleaming, meticulously maintained corporate facade. More importantly, crucially, I knew about the impending merger long before almost anyone else did. One late night, while diligently cleaning the main boardroom after a marathon meeting had finally concluded, my eyes caught a crumpled piece of paper carelessly kicked under the massive table. It was a discarded draft, a preliminary set of acquisition terms from Omnicorp Solutions, outlining a potential multi-billion-dollar buyout of Apex Innovations. A cold, hard smile touched my lips in the dim light. I knew, with chilling certainty, that my time, the moment I had patiently waited for over 15 agonizing years, was finally, irrevocably approaching. Julian had become so utterly consumed by maintaining his carefully constructed image as a brilliant, infallible CEO that he had recklessly overleveraged the company, pushing it to the financial brink. The only viable path forward for him now was this merger, this buyout by Omnicorp. But he didn't grasp the full picture. He didn't realize that Omnicorp's seemingly generous offer wasn't a lifeline thrown to save him. No, it was a carefully baited, meticulously set trap. Because what Julian, and indeed no one else at Apex Innovations, could possibly know was the final, critical piece of the puzzle. I also owned significant, influential shares in Omnicorp Solutions itself, acquisitions carefully concealed behind the very same opaque web of shell companies I used to reclaim my stake in Apex. I had spent years subtly, patiently influencing their leadership from the shadows, nudging them, positioning them strategically to make this exact move at this precise moment. I continued my monotonous daily routine, polishing floors and emptying trash, silently watching Julian strut around the Apex offices with ever-increasing, unbearable smugness as the merger talks progressed towards their conclusion. He absolutely loved holding court in the employee break room, loudly bragging to anyone who would listen about how he, single-handedly, had built Apex Innovations from absolutely nothing. He boasted endlessly about how his supposedly brilliant leadership had naturally attracted the prestigious attention of a giant like Omnicorp. This merger, mark my words, will finally cement my legacy, he announced one morning, beaming at a small group of fawning, sycophantic executives hanging on his every word. Apex Innovations is about to become a true global powerhouse thanks to me. I was methodically mopping the floor nearby, completely invisible to them, as always, just part of the scenery. If any of them had bothered to look closely beyond the uniform, they might, just might, have noticed the faint, knowing smile playing on my lips. Julian had absolutely no inkling, no premonition whatsoever that his precious, self-aggrandizing legacy was poised to crumble into dust before his very eyes. The official merger announcement hit the news wires and went public on a Tuesday morning. Apex Innovations' stock immediately soared as market analysts enthusiastically praised the deal's supposed synergistic potential. Suddenly, Julian was absolutely everywhere, giving slick TV interviews, posing for flattering newspaper profiles, pontificating on industry panels. The narrative of his meteoric success was utterly irresistible to the media. The visionary CEO, the narrative went, who had bravely guided his company through the treacherous waters of the 2008 downturn and single-handedly built it into an acquisition target worth multiple billions. It was a compelling story, albeit a complete fabrication. All that remained now was the final shareholder vote to approve the terms and the official signing of the documents. A mere formality, Julian assured everyone, brimming with misplaced confidence. After all, he firmly believed he controlled the vast majority of the voting shares through a complex network of loyal allies and backroom arrangements he had cultivated over the years. That's precisely when my carefully hidden web of companies, the patient spiders I had cultivated for so long, began to slowly, deliberately emerge from the shadows. It started small, almost imperceptibly at first. One of my shell companies, Argent Capital, formally registered its vote against the proposed merger terms. Then another, Horizon Ventures, followed suit. And then Meridian Equity. One after another, the dissenting votes piled up. Julian's executive team scrambled frantically, desperately trying to identify these mysterious, unexpected shareholders who dared to obstruct the deal. But my lawyers had meticulously constructed an impenetrable maze of corporate entities, spanning multiple countries and jurisdictions, designed specifically for this purpose. I watched Julian's mounting frustration, his simmering rage with a quiet, detached satisfaction from the shadows of my janitorial supply closet. His once impeccably organized office descended into chaos as he held a series of increasingly tense, unproductive emergency meetings with his flustered legal team. Confidential papers were strewn everywhere. Half-empty coffee cups were left unwashed, the expensive window blinds hung askew, mirroring his own unraveling state. He completely stopped noticing the small details, whether his trash bin was empty or if his floors gleamed with their usual polish. His obsession with appearances was faltering under the strain. One evening, late, while I was methodically making my usual cleaning rounds through the mostly deserted executive floor, I overheard him shouting furiously into his phone inside his office, the sound echoing in the otherwise silent space. "What in God's name do you mean you can't find out who owns these damn companies?" he roared, his voice tight with panic. "I need to know who the hell is blocking my merger. Now." His voice cracked slightly. "This deal absolutely has to go through. Do you understand?" There was a desperate edge creeping in. "The bank loans. They're coming due soon, and without this merger." He stopped abruptly, catching himself, suddenly realizing he had perhaps said too much, even though he clearly thought he was completely alone in the vast, empty office. But I heard it. I heard the raw, unmistakable fear lacing his voice. The elaborate house of cards he had so arrogantly constructed over 15 years was finally starting to wobble precariously. That night, as I cleaned his opulent office for what I knew would be the very last time, I let my gaze linger on the wall covered with framed awards and glossy magazine covers, all celebrating the mythical business genius of Julian Vance. Tomorrow, tomorrow, everything would fundamentally change. Tomorrow, the invisible maintenance man would finally step out of the shadows and forcibly remind him of the partner, the friend, he had so ruthlessly betrayed 15 long years ago. With meticulous care, I adjusted his desk back to its perfect 90-degree angles one last time. I polished his expansive windows until they gleamed, reflecting the city lights far below. And then I emptied his trash bin, symbolic and final. In just a few short hours, Julian Vance would learn a harsh, indelible lesson. Appearances can be profoundly deceiving, and true, lasting power doesn't always announce itself by wearing a designer suit. The morning designated for the official merger signing arrived, crisp and bright. I didn't show up for my usual early morning cleaning duties at the Zenith Tower. Instead, I went back to my small, sparsely furnished apartment and opened the closet door I had kept resolutely locked for 15 long years. Inside, hanging pristine and waiting, was a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit. It wasn't flashy or ostentatious, but impeccably cut from fine fabric, radiating an aura of quiet, understated expense. I took my time getting ready, deliberately shedding the persona of Mike the maintenance man. I was transforming, reclaiming myself, becoming Evan Thompson, the rightful majority shareholder of Apex Innovations, once more. The nondescript mustache I had worn for years was gone, shaved clean, replaced by a face that, despite the passage of time and hardship, had perhaps aged better than Julian might have expected or hoped. I stood tall, consciously releasing the carefully practiced, deferential slouch I had maintained for so long it had almost become second nature. It was truly amazing, I reflected, how a simple change in posture could effectively erase years of cultivated invisibility. The signing ceremony was formally scheduled for 10 o'clock sharp in Apex Innovations' main conference room, the one with the panoramic city views. I arrived precisely at 9:45 a.m., purposefully striding not through the anonymous service entrance I had used countless times over the past 15 years, but through the gleaming, imposing main lobby of the Zenith Tower. The security guard at the main desk, Marcus Jones, a decent man who had always shown a measure of kindness to the often overlooked cleaning staff, did a noticeable double take as I approached. He clearly couldn't quite place the familiar yet unfamiliar face before him. I took the restricted executive elevator, the express car, up to the top floor, consciously savoring the subtle, expensive scent of the polished wood and leather interior. An interior I myself had cleaned and maintained meticulously so many times. When the elevator door slid open onto the executive floor, Julian's young assistant, Chloe Miller, was busy arranging bottles of imported mineral water on the polished conference room table. "Excuse me, sir," she said politely, professionally, though her eyes held no flicker of recognition for the man who had emptied her office trash bin almost every night for years. "I'm sorry, but the merger signing is a private event, restricted access only." A faint smile played on my lips. The moment was finally here. "I know," I replied calmly, my voice steady. "I'm a major shareholder." The expansive conference room filled quickly over the next few minutes. Julian's anxious legal team arrived, clutching thick binders. The confident, slightly aloof Omnicorp Solutions executives took their seats. Board members from both companies milled about, impeccably dressed in their finest power suits, all radiating an air of supreme confidence that this signing was merely a procedural formality, the triumphant culmination of months of negotiation. Julian himself swept into the room precisely at 9:55 a.m., his timing deliberately calculated, as always, to make a grand entrance, ensuring all eyes were on him. He looked momentarily surprised, perhaps even irritated, to find someone already occupying his customary seat at the head of the long, imposing table. But he quickly masked his reaction with his practiced, easygoing corporate smile. "I don't believe we've had the pleasure of meeting," he said smoothly, extending his hand towards me with practiced charm. "Julian Vance, CEO of Apex Innovations." I rose slowly from the chair, deliberately savoring the exquisite tension of the moment I had visualized countless times over 15 years. "Actually, Julian," I said, my voice resonating clearly in the suddenly quiet room, "we have met before." His outstretched hand froze awkwardly in midair. I watched with a cold, detached fascination as the blood visibly drained from his face, his confident mask crumbling as the impossible recognition finally dawned in his eyes. 15 years, a lifetime it seemed, had passed between us. But in that stunning, suspended moment, he finally saw him. The young, idealistic partner he had ruthlessly betrayed and cast aside. "Evan," he whispered, the name barely audible, choked with disbelief. "Hello, Julian," I replied, my voice level, betraying none of the turmoil that raged beneath the surface. "It certainly has been a while." The conference room had gone deathly quiet. You could hear a pin drop. Julian's legal team exchanged nervous, wide-eyed glances. The Omnicorp executives looked utterly bewildered, clearly sensing something was deeply wrong. "What? What in God's name are you doing here?" Julian finally managed to stammer out, desperately trying and failing to regain his shattered composure. I calmly reached down and pulled out a thick stack of meticulously organized documents from my briefcase. "I'm here to vote on the merger, Julian," I stated plainly. "Or rather, my companies are here to vote." I began listing them deliberately. Argent Capital, Horizon Ventures, Meridian Equity. I believe your team has been frantically trying and failing to identify the principles behind these particular shareholders for several weeks now. Julian sank heavily back into a nearby chair, his legs seemingly unable to support his weight any longer. His face was ashen. "That's impossible," he muttered, shaking his head. "Completely impossible. You sold all your shares years ago." I made absolutely sure of it. His voice trailed off. "You made sure I sold my original shares, yes," I corrected him sharply, cutting him off. "My initial stake, but I've been systematically buying back into the company I co-founded for the past 15 years. Patiently, quietly, through shell companies, through proxy investors, using every perfectly legal means available to me." I leaned forward slightly. "Would you perhaps like to know exactly how much of Apex Innovations I control now, Julian?" His lawyers were now frantically flipping through their own documents, their faces growing visibly paler by the minute as the dawning, horrific truth began to sink in. 60%, I announced clearly, addressing the entire stunned room. "I own 60% of Apex Innovations, which means, quite simply, that this merger doesn't happen without my explicit approval." One of the senior Omnicorp executives cleared his throat, breaking the heavy silence. "Mr. Vance," he addressed Julian, his voice laced with sudden uncertainty. "What exactly is going on here?" I turned my attention to address the entire room, my voice calm, but carrying authority. "Allow me to tell you all a story," I began. "The story about how Apex Innovations really began. About two young partners who poured their hearts and souls into building something truly amazing from scratch, until one of them saw a selfish opportunity during the chaos of the 2008 downturn. For the next 20 minutes, I laid out everything, calmly and methodically. The sham emergency board meeting deliberately called while I was overseas attending to my dying mother. The forged documents stripping me of my rights and ownership. The subsequent vicious smear campaign designed to destroy my reputation and ensure I could never fight back. I presented the damning evidence I had painstakingly gathered over 15 long years, financial records, internal emails I'd recovered, even sworn testimonies from former board members who, facing their own potential legal troubles, had finally admitted their complicity in Julian's scheme. "So you see," I concluded, my gaze sweeping across the shocked faces in the room, finally resting on Julian's stunned expression. Julian Vance isn't the brilliant, visionary CEO who built this company alone through sheer genius and hard work. He's a fraud, a man who stole this company from his partner, his friend, and frankly, has been systematically running it into the ground with his reckless ambition ever since. That's a damnable lie. Julian suddenly shot to his feet, his face contorted with rage, all pretense of control gone. I saved this company. I navigated the downturn. I made Apex what it is today. Really? I raised a skeptical eyebrow, my voice dripping with irony. Is that why you're so utterly desperate for this Omnicorp buyout to go through? Because the company is thriving so spectacularly well under your expert leadership? My voice hardened. Or could it possibly be because the massive loans you recklessly took out to finance your overly aggressive expansion are coming due very soon, and you simply don't have the cash flow to cover them without this deal? The Omnicorp team was now muttering urgently among themselves. Their initial confidence completely evaporated. Their lead lawyer, Ms. Reed, a sharp woman I knew by reputation, stood up formally. "Clearly, we need to pause this proceeding immediately," she stated firmly. "If there are substantial questions regarding Mr. Vance's authority and the true financial status of Apex Innovations." "Oh, the merger can still potentially happen," I interrupted calmly, taking control. Just not on Julian's original, self-serving terms, and certainly not with him remaining as CEO. That was the final straw for Julian. He lunged violently across the table towards me, all his carefully cultivated corporate polish vanishing in an explosion of pure, uncontrolled fury. Instantly, two uniformed security guards I personally recognized, men I had watched Julian berate and demean countless times over the years, grabbed his arms firmly. "You can't do this to me," he shouted hysterically, struggling against their grip. "This is my company. Mine." "No, Julian," I replied quietly, but with absolute finality. It never truly was, and now, finally, everyone knows it. The next few hours were pure, unadulterated chaos. The Omnicorp team immediately huddled with their lawyers in a separate room, their faces grim. Apex Innovations board members, quickly assessing which way the political winds were now blowing, rapidly began distancing themselves from the disgraced Julian. His formerly loyal executives suddenly, almost comically, remembered urgent appointments elsewhere in the building or city. By the end of the tumultuous day, Julian Vance had been formally removed as CEO of Apex Innovations by an emergency board vote. The multi-billion-dollar merger with Omnicorp was officially postponed pending a thorough, independent investigation into the company's finances and Julian's leadership. And I, Evan Thompson, had been appointed interim CEO to steer the ship through the storm. Though not before I revealed one final, stunning detail to the utterly shell-shocked board members gathered before me. "There's one more thing you should all know," I told them, my voice steady. "For the past 15 years, I haven't just been watching from afar. I've worked right here, in this very building, the Zenith Tower, as a member of the maintenance staff." Gasps rippled through the room. "I've cleaned your offices late at night. I've observed your operations firsthand. I've come to understand this company, not just from spreadsheets, but from the ground up. I know every hidden strength and every glaring weakness. I know every loyal, hardworking employee and every self-serving manager looking out only for themselves. I know precisely who deserves promotion and who, frankly, needs to be shown the door." I met their stunned gaze directly. And I know exactly how to fix what Julian broke. The looks on their faces, shock, disbelief, perhaps a dawning realization of their own obliviousness, were truly priceless. Many of these executives, these board members, had walked past me countless times in the hallways over the years, never once making eye contact, never offering a simple hello, dismissing me as utterly insignificant. Now they couldn't seem to stop staring, trying to reconcile the man before them with the ghost they had ignored for so long. That evening, long after everyone else had finally left the turbulent executive floor, I went back to the janitorial supply closet one last time. It felt strangely surreal. I changed back into my old, familiar navy blue uniform and did my final rounds, saying quiet goodbyes to the night shift workers, the security guards, the other maintenance staff, who had been my true colleagues, my community, for 15 challenging years. Mike, is it true? You're really the new CEO? Hector Ramirez, my fellow maintenance worker, asked me, his voice filled with utter disbelief, but also a glimmer of hope. I am Hector, I confirmed with a small smile. And my very first official act as interim CEO will be implementing a significant wage increase for all maintenance and support staff throughout Apex Innovations. This company was built on your hard work, your dedication, even if the executives upstairs never truly realized or appreciated it. I ended my final shift fittingly in Julian's former office, my office now. The very same expansive corner office I had meticulously cleaned every single morning before dawn for 15 long years. I automatically began adjusting the items on the large desk back to perfect 90-degree angles. Not because Julian demanded it anymore, but simply because I realized with a wry internal smile some deeply ingrained habits die hard. A sudden movement in the hallway outside the glass walls caught my eye. It was Julian being escorted out by security, carrying a single, pathetic cardboard box filled with his personal items. He saw me standing there, inside his former domain, inexplicably dressed back in my maintenance uniform. He stopped short, his face a maelstrom of raw fury, confusion, and utter disbelief. 15 years. He finally choked out, his voice rough. You actually spent 15 years cleaning toilets just to get revenge on me? I allowed myself a small, genuine smile then, slowly straightening to my full height, letting go of the last vestiges of the invisible man. No, Julian, I replied calmly, meeting his gaze directly. I spent 15 years meticulously learning every single detail, every nuance, every flaw of the company you foolishly thought you stole from me. My smile faded slightly. The cleaning, I added, my voice quiet but firm, was just good, honest work. Something you, in all your ambition, never truly understood the value of. He left without another word, turning abruptly, his expensive Italian leather shoes clicking sharply down the polished hallway one last, final time. The sound echoed, and then faded into silence. The next morning, I arrived at Apex Innovations wearing my charcoal gray suit again. But I made it explicitly clear to everyone, from the board members down to the mailroom clerks, that my door, the CEO's door, was always open to any employee, regardless of their position or title. Because I had learned something profoundly valuable during my long years of self-imposed invisibility. The real, beating heart of any company isn't found solely in its luxurious executive suite. It resides within the dedicated people who show up reliably every single day, often unseen and unappreciated, to do the essential work that keeps the entire enterprise functioning. Some of the more traditional board members delicately suggested I hire a professional cleaning service specifically for my own CEO office. I politely but firmly declined their suggestion. Every morning, without fail, I still come into the office early, before most others arrive, to clean my own space. It keeps me grounded. It serves as a constant, tangible reminder of the vital lessons I learned during those 15 long years of watching, waiting, and planning from the shadows. As for Julian Vance, I hear occasional whispers that he now works as a mid-level manager at some small, struggling consulting firm across town. Sometimes the rumors say he tells people he used to be the CEO of a major tech company, but apparently no one really believes him. After all, he just doesn't look the part anymore. He lacks the aura, the confidence, the essential spark. And as for me, I am exactly where I belong. Leading the company I helped build from the ground up, dedicated now to making it stronger, more ethical, and ultimately more successful than it ever was under Julian's flawed, self-serving leadership. And every single morning, When I meticulously adjust the items on my desk to those perfect 90-degree angles, I can't help but smile faintly at the fundamental truth Julian Vance never grasped. Sometimes, the most powerful person in the room is the one you didn't even see.